3,000 tons of Georgia yellow pine, bolted, caulked, sealed against water deep enough to crush a human chest. The heaviest structure ever launched in America was not a ship. It was the foundation of the Brooklyn Bridge. March 1870. The Webb Bell Shipyard in Greenpoint slides a wooden behemoth into the East River. It was 168 feet long and 102 feet wide. A watertight lung made of resin-soaked timber so dense it barely floated. This box, the caisson, would sink to the riverbed. Men inside would dig through muck and pressurized air, while the full weight of a granite tower slowly crushed down from above. The shipwrights who built it understood oakum, pitch, and the hydrostatic pressure of the Atlantic. What they did not understand, what no one understood, was the physiology of compressed air. 110 men would suffer the bends. 3 would die from the sickness. Dozens more would be crushed by falling rock or mangled by hoisting gear. This is the story of the workers who built America's most famous bridge from inside a chamber where the air itself was venomous. A box built with techniques that sealed Roman galleys, techniques now practiced only in museum workshops. The Brooklyn Bridge caissons were the last great act of an ancient craft. To understand why a bridge required shipwrights, you must understand the dirt. John Roebling designed the span, but a ferry accident at the Fulton Street dock crushed his foot and killed him with tetanus before he laid a single stone. His son Washington inherited the title and the problem. The granite towers needed to stand on bedrock. On the Brooklyn side, that rock lay 44 feet down. On the Manhattan side, it dropped to nearly 80 feet, deeper than any foundation in American history. You cannot dig a hole in a river. The water fills it faster than you can shovel. The solution came from France, the pneumatic caisson. The principle is simple. Imagine forcing an empty glass upside down into a bathtub. The trapped air bubble keeps the inside dry. Now, scale that glass to the size of a cathedral. You lower the box. You pump in compressed air until the internal pressure matches the external water pressure. The air holds the river at bay. Men enter through an airlock, descend into the chamber, and dig. As they remove mud, the box sinks. As it sinks, masons stack stone on the roof. The tower's weight pushes the cutting edge deeper. Once you hit bedrock, you fill the void with concrete and leave it there forever. Simple physics. Lethal execution. Webb and Bell built a bunker. They stacked 12 by 12 timbers in courses, bolting them vertically and horizontally. The roof alone was 15 feet thick, a fortified wooden slab designed to bear a tower reaching 276 feet into the sky. But mass leaks. Under 35 pounds per square inch, air pushes through pine grain like water through silk. The seal relied on the caulker's feel. Shipwrights passed this trade down through apprenticeship. No blueprint could convey the force required to drive oakum, hemp fiber soaked in tar, into a seam without splitting the wood. The mallet rhythm was hypnotic. Drive, drive, set. Drive, drive, set. You listened for the ring. A dull thud meant the seam was loose. A sharp, high-pitched ping meant the oakum was rock-hard, a watertight wedge capable of holding back the Atlantic. When the structure hits water, the wood swells against the fiber. The seal tightens. A well-caulked seam actually becomes stronger under pressure. Crews packed oakum 6 inches deep into every seam, inside and out. They poured hot pitch into the gaps until it flowed like syrup. Between the 4th and 5th timber courses, they laid sheets of tin to catch any air that cheated the caulking. Roebling was paranoid about leaks. He added layers of coal tar, rosin, and cement. He sheathed the interior in iron. He soaked the pine in creosote. Each layer was a redundancy against the river. The men who sealed these boxes did not call themselves engineers. They were caulkers. Their trade had kept hulls watertight since before the compass. They did not know that steel and welding torches would make them obsolete within 2 generations. December 1st, 1870. A worker named McDonald climbs a frame brace in the Brooklyn caisson. He is holding a candle. He drops it. McDonald retrieves the candle, plasters over the scorch mark to hide his mistake, and vanishes. He was never seen again. But in high-pressure air, fire doesn't need a draft. In that density, a candle flame doesn't flicker upward. It acts like a blowtorch. It bored horizontally into the timber, hunting the oxygen packed inside the wood grain. Washington Roebling arrived the next morning to find the roof burning from the inside out. The fire had eaten 5 feet up and 50 feet across. It was invisible, silent, and hot enough to liquefy the resin in the pine. They tried everything. They packed the holes with sand. They plastered them with mud. The men pressed their own bodies against the smoking wood to smother it. Nothing worked. At 3 a.m., Roebling made the decision to flood the structure. Fireboats pumped 1.3 million gallons of river water into the caisson. It sat submerged for 2 days. When they pumped it out, the damage was catastrophic. The fire had created vast charcoal caverns in the structural timber. If they poured concrete now, the roof would collapse under the tower's weight. Roebling sent 18 carpenters into the void. They worked day and night for 2 months, scraping char in spaces too small to turn, breathing candle smoke, cement dust, and powdered charcoal. The repair cost $250,000. It also cost Roebling his health. He emerged from those 7 hours of fire watching with a peculiar numbness in his legs, the first kiss of decompression sickness. The culprit was nitrogen. The atmosphere inside the caisson was not just heavy, it was saturating. Under 4 atmospheres of pressure, nitrogen gas dissolves into the blood. Ascend slowly, and it exhales harmlessly. Ascend fast, and the soda bottle opens. Nitrogen bubbles erupt in the joints, the spine, the brain. The pain is excruciating. Men doubled over, unable to straighten their bodies, locked in a Grecian bend, a posture that gave the disease its name. No one understood the science. They thought the compressed air itself was poisonous. They blamed vital exhaustion. They installed steam coils to heat the air, thinking the cold caused the cramping. It did nothing. The Manhattan caisson was worse. It had to descend to 78 feet. The pressure reached 35 pounds per square inch. Frank Harris, a young worker who descended into the darkness, captured the terror when he wrote that the bends were a sort of convulsive fit that twisted one's body like a knot and often made you an invalid for life. The compression upon entering the airlock drove men's eardrums inward until they ruptured. The only defense was to swallow continuously, forcing air up the Eustachian tubes. Workers emerged with blood streaming from their ears and noses. By the time the Manhattan caisson hit 78 feet, the men were striking for safer hours. Roebling, who had spent more time in the pressurized air than anyone, finally collapsed. In the spring of 1872, he suffered a seizure that nearly killed him. He would not visit the site again for 11 years. For the rest of the project, he sat in a room in Brooklyn Heights, watching through a telescope, relaying orders through his wife, Emily. Emily Roebling became the de facto chief engineer. She learned the math. She learned the cable stress loads. She managed the personalities of the assistant engineers. She was the bridge's voice, while Washington was its mind. In late spring 1872, with the Manhattan caisson resting on hard-packed sand, Roebling made a decision. He stopped digging. The cutting edge was still 20 feet above bedrock. Every engineering principle demanded he go deeper. But Roebling did the math. The sand was prehistoric, compacted by glaciers. It could bear the load. He also calculated the human cost. Going to bedrock meant increasing the pressure to 45 pounds per square inch. At that depth, the death toll from the bends would not be 3 men. It would be 100. He gambled on the sand. It held. That foundation has not shifted in 152 years. The Brooklyn Bridge opened on May 24, 1883. Emily Roebling crossed first, carrying a rooster as a symbol of victory. Washington watched from his window. The caissons were never seen again. They remain exactly where the shipwrights of Webb and Bell placed them, sealed in concrete, supporting the weight of granite towers, steel cables, and a century of traffic. But the skills that made them watertight did not survive. By 1890, engineers switched to steel caissons. Welded seams replaced caulked timber. Steel was stronger, cheaper, and did not catch fire. It also did not require artisans who had spent years learning to judge the feel of oakum by the sound of a mallet. The last generation of commercial ship caulkers retired in the 1930s. Today, traditional oakum caulking is a museum art, practiced at places like the Wooden Boat School in Maine or the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum. It exists to keep antique yachts afloat, not to build nations. The Brooklyn Bridge is currently undergoing a $262 million rehabilitation. Workers are scrubbing stone, replacing steel, and reinforcing arches. No one is touching the foundations. The shipwrights who sealed those caissons did their work too well. The Georgia yellow pine was pickled in pitch and oakum, sealed with redundancies born of fire and death. It does not require repair. It requires only that we remember who built it. Not just the Roeblings, but the men in the box. Men paid $2 a day to breathe venomous air. Men who emerged bent double, bleeding from the ears. They were not engineers. They were laborers with inherited skills, using methods that predated the country they were building. They sealed the Brooklyn Bridge with the same tools that sealed Viking longships. And then those methods died. The caissons hold. The workers are forgotten. The caulkers are gone. That is the price of progress, paid for in oakum and blood.